Welcome to the TMC Connect webinar, How to Right-Size Your Company to Current Market Levels. Today we have with us David Licken and Howard Nathan from TMS Advisors, and David Kittle, also with TMS Advisors, and our very own co-founder and partner of TMC. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It is an honor to be here, and this is an important topic, and I'm excited to get this really launched. How this started was David Kittle, who and I have been friends for a long time, longer than we probably want to admit, said, hey, Licken, there's a real issue out there. A lot of people are struggling with how to downsize or right-size their company in this market. And we're seeing a lot of decisions as consultants, we're seeing a lot of decisions that are being made. You kind of scratch your head going, what were you thinking when you did that? And so David brought that to my attention. I said, we're seeing the same thing. Let's do something about it. And so with that, we connected, and we've been connected as friends, and we've worked together in the past. So it's a real honor to work with you, David. And then you introduced me to Howard Nathan, who has also recently joined us as a fractional CFO and our firm, providing services to our clients on a fractional CFO basis. And so, David, I'd like to have you take it from here and tell us about what you're doing. I may have a few questions in the midst of that.
Well, I hope you do. Well, thanks. And thanks to TMC for letting us do this. We certainly appreciate it. And so I was attending this conference with Meridian Link back in the first part of the year, who is also a preferred partner for the Mortgage Collaborative, and leading a session. And after the session, I had, 7 or 8 people come up, and we were talking about the market, where it was going. This is in February, and they were talking about still losing loan officers, and their volumes were starting to decrease, and what were they going to do with their companies? And the questions kept coming, and that's when I picked up the phone the next day when I got home, and I said, David, I think there's a need out there because people don't know how to right size and downsize. And I think right size is a much better terminology. So we put this together. I invited Howard Nathan. Howard and I worked together before. He was Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operating Officer for a company that I was CEO of. And so we have a past experience together. And we brought on a gentleman, David, that you introduced us to, Stephen Chapman. Stephen couldn't join us today for a time commitment, but we're going to talk about what Stephen does. So the three of us got together and we said, if we go into a company, what would it look like? How could we help these people? And we all bring something different to the table. Mine from a C-suite. I've had 3 of my own lending companies. I'm in my 47th year in the mortgage lending business now, and this is, I think, my 7th or 8th major correction up or down, and I've seen it all. So I bring that expertise. Howard certainly brings the financial side and the operation side, and Stephen brings something unique we'll get into in just a minute, and that's from a cultural perspective. And he works full-time for Allstate Insurance, but takes care of all of the culture inside Allstate. So he's got a master's degree in that. So it's a perfect fit to go in and talk to people about how they did it, where they make their decisions to cut or downsize, and make sure that they do it in the right way for the people. So because you can actually grow in a market like this. And so that's what we're going to do. So I would like to, at this point, just turn this over to Howard Nathan and introduce Howard again, and let him tell us a little bit about what his expertise is and what he's going to do when we go into these companies.
Sure. Thanks, David. So, I've been in the business now for, I guess, 25 plus years. I don't like to go any higher than that because I start to show my age, but much like David, I've seen the ups and the downs. And look, I think everybody on this call, has experience in downsizing and doing those things. But what we think we can bring to the table is an objective view of the decisions you make. Because no matter how hard you try, when you're sitting around with your management team, your executive team, there's always those decisions that are made that maybe aren't based on facts, but you let emotion start to trickle in. And in this type of environment, unfortunately, you want to try and take as much of the emotion out of it. That's not to say you're emotionless, as my colleagues would say that maybe I am as a CFO, but I kind of have three pillars that really base your decisions on. And one, there should be kind of that no sacred cows. The second one is, try and drive your decisions by data as much as possible. And then the third one is, whatever you do, don't look at this too short-term in nature. The market's going to come back. It's going to correct it. This is a correction. We've all probably been through it, David, 7 or 8 times. Others, maybe it's your first or second, but everybody's been through it. And we all know the market. If the one thing that's certain about interest rates, when they go up, is they probably will eventually come back down to some degree and give you that next opportunity. So really what we're trying to do is kind of bring that objective look to all of you to bounce your ideas off. And, we don't have any stake in the game. We just want to make sure you're making the best choice for your company, both in the short term and the long term.
I've got a question for you, Howard. As you're looking at this, what are some of the blind spots you see people can fall into when analyzing the expense side of the ledger and trying to make that decision?
Well, again, it really comes down to, certain things, needs versus wants. Sometimes you think something's a need, but really it's more of a want. And that has to do with both your personnel needs and, various expenditures. When it comes down to looking at specific vendors, loyalty is important, but you have to make sure you're making rational decisions and it's not based on, you really like the account executive for a particular vendor. That plays into it. But really, it's just taking that kind of more objective look and, like I said, trying to take as much of the emotion out of it as possible.
That's spot on. Mr. Kittle, we both have sat in many a C-suite and we've both been CEOs of our own company. What do you see as you're talking to people, especially within the TMC membership? And again, thank you to TMC for allowing us to have this. But what are some of the difficulties as a CEO or anyone in the C-suite struggle with when it comes to the cuts?
Well, it's interesting.
Right sizing.
A couple of 2 answers to this question. I'm actually having a conversation with a TMC member about 10 days ago, and a CFO at a company, and they're making the decisions internally, just like everybody else. And some cuts were made. Now, remember, this gentleman is high up in the organization, but cuts were made without his knowledge. So improper communication inside the company, people that actually reported to him, which he should have had a say in. So communication when you do this is of the utmost importance. And to Howard's point, it's going to be emotional because, if you're a good manager, you do have some connection to all your employees. You have that emotional connection, and it's tough to be objective because everybody, human nature is you're going to play favorites. So you need that objective outside look, and that's what we're going to provide.
I think that's really good. And I might speak to Steven's not here with us, but I worked with Steven. I met him. We both were part of a group that Patrick Lencioni formed. And so we had the privilege of working close with Patrick Lencioni and the team. And he developed something called the 6 Working Geniuses. And it's an assessment tool that Steven uses, I use, that helps you go through and balance out skill sets. And when it comes to skill set balancing, oftentimes we find, or I should ask this as a question, it's something I've seen to be the case, but Howard and David, do you also see people having a tendency to keep people that they like versus what they need? And it's outside of the perspective of when we say need, what do we need to balance the decision process across the organization? Start with you, David.
Yeah, certainly. That goes back to the emotional capital that you have. So absolutely they do that, it's and Howard maybe can speak to this a little bit better than I can, but I've made the mistake before of just going and looking and saying, well, here's the biggest salary. This is what we need to get rid of back in the 90s. And it was just the wrong move. Look back on it now, and I didn't do it right. So we've all made the mistake.
We've all made it.
Not just, you don't go to the biggest number on your balance sheet to get rid of it to right size, because that's going to probably damage internally the company and going forward for you to actually right size and grow going forward.
Yeah, I mean, to add on to that, what David says, yes, I think that's where, there's a balance. It isn't about just cutting the highest cost people. It's making sure you have the right people left to still to run your company as it should be. And that goes to all your cuts. I mean, I've seen, you can sit here and save small amounts, and this is where Steven's element comes into play. And I use this because I've seen it where they want to change the brand of coffee to save all of $20 a month, and the uproar within the organization is shocking. And looking back on it, it's like, what was the purpose? I mean, I think I would have taken $20 out of my pocket and just gave it to the company every month to not have to deal with something that's really trivial,
Inconsequential. Yeah.
inconsequential from a cost perspective, but the emotional and the cultural impact has a lot of meaning on the people that are left. So that's where it comes in to really taking an objective look and balancing things out.
One of the things, David Kittle, when you and I are talking, we go by Kittle and Licken. So anyone watching this, we're not being disrespectful, but Kittle, when you and I were talking about this, you actually came up with an interesting observation to one person you were talking to. You'll recall this as I begin to bring it up. This was an individual, not what should they reduce, right size, but should they own their own business?
Right.
Maybe they would be better inside of another organization. Talk about that, because I think that's a consideration that maybe more and more people need to look at.
So over the last, I would say maybe off on the year just a little bit, and remind me in just a second, David, because I want to get to some of the things that Stephen provides.
Yes.
In detail. If you got into the business in the last 15 to 17 years, all you've seen is lower interest rates. You've not been in a climbing interest rate market. A lot of people went from being broker to lender, got warehouse lines, which is great.
Yeah.
But I always say, the best way to screw up a salesman is to make them a manager. So if you're a great salesperson, then all of a sudden now you have a company and you're building it, and your skill set may not be president, CEO, or manager. And you need to make sure you have the right people in place. Now, in this particular market, there are opportunities out there as you downsize. You can be absorbed by other companies out there. And that may be the right decision for you after we get in here and look at your books when you're a smaller lender. So there's all kinds of options and opportunities out here.
Back to what you were starting to say about Stephen, because I think this is an element of the business. We all understand Howard's role. It's one that, we give Howard a bad time, the heartless CFO coming in here and doing the cuts that just really aren't thought all the way through, but it's necessary. There is a unique balance in this. And I'm really excited about what Stephen is bringing to this. And Howard, you touched on it, but let's start with you, David. Talk a little bit more about the human element, the cultural element.
So when we get into it, Stephen's probably on the end of the evaluation when we come in, but it's the culture inside the company. Is your company that you have right now really a place where people want to work? All right, because that means a lot to your profitability going forward. So we take a look at that. So we call this consulting opportunity. Actually, we've named it as organizational health. So we'll come in and help you get healthy and give you the right tools and going forward. But Stephen has 4 bullets he wanted me to get out, or if I could. He goes, you need to create, and remember, this gentleman has a master's degree in what he's talking about. So this just isn't something that he's come up with. So this is what he does for a living. Create cohesive teams. You kind of go, well, duh, but a lot of people haven't done that. Create clarity on purpose, values, mission, and strategy, and your short-term goals inside your company. This is one I love, number 3 here, over communicate the clarity in bullet number 2. You can't over communicate enough inside is what he's saying. And finally, reinforce the clarity through hiring performance reviews, business processes, organizational structure, etc. So you have your plan, you communicate it properly, and you reinforce it, and you develop a wonderful culture inside your company. A lot of companies don't have that.
Yeah, I think they struggle with that, especially when in a downsizing. And then it's how to keep the culture in a downsized manner, because you're looking around, you're seeing people that you used to work with, that you maybe cared for or didn't care for. Maybe sometimes you're just glad to see some people gone, but more times than not, no matter if you like them or didn't particularly care for them, you're sad to see them go. And I think this is a time where really emotionally a high EQ, emotional quotient, is so important. It's one of the things I love about you, Kittle, is you just care about people deeply. I've watched many a tear go down, literally a tears go down your eyes here. One of the things I envy more about you is your ability to connect at an emotional level with people. This is a difficult decision, and it needs, as you said, third-party objectivity when looking at it. I really celebrate that part of why, and that's why I'm so excited about you on our team leading this initiative.
Well, thank you for that. Howard, what would you add to that?
I think I've added all I have to add that now. I think that was a good summary of why we're doing it and what we're doing.
That's really good. Well, Sarah and Amy, I'm not sure how much time we allotted for this. I think we're getting kind of close to initially. I don't know if there's any questions out there. If not, we have a few other points that we can drive home. But how much time do we have here, Sarah, that we should allow for?
Yeah, we have until 3:30. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and drop them in the chat and we can get those answered for you guys.
What are some of the common questions as we're waiting for some questions? Mr. Kittle, actually, I'm just getting texted a couple of questions, so that's interesting. It's good. So Mr. Kittle, one of the questions that you run up with more than anything else, and we'll put the same question to you, Howard. What are some of the questions that you run that seem to come at you when you approach this whole process?
So the first one I get all the time, I mean, and it probably asked myself this, 30 years ago, is when you know you have to make the changes, can't go back to, I'm going to get rid of the highest salary on my balance sheet, right? But where can I take those duties and who can I give them to? How can I push down some management stuff and raise people up internally and give them more to do? Are they cross-trained? So sometimes cross-training is great, but when you start pushing down C-suite, C-level responsibilities to mid-level managers, you are destined for trouble. That's why you just don't go in and cut your biggest salary. You have to do it strategically. You got to look at it and really put together a plan going forward.
I think one of the questions I often get as we go through this is, how much is enough? And that's where, it gets down to a little bit of the data and having and I'm sure everybody on the call has heard this, but having a financial forecasting model is important too, so that you can figure that out and you're not just kind of guessing. And that comes back to one of my original points about, make sure it's data driven as best you can. So you shouldn't just be thinking like, okay, this is enough. Because one thing you want to try and do is if you have to do this, in a perfect world, you only have to do it once and then everybody's at ease. If you have to go back and do it again, everybody suddenly is concerned forever because they don't know when it's over. So you try and get it right the first time.
Sorry, Howard, I thought you were finished, but to Howard's point, if I could add on, you put together, everybody loves to get a strategic plan, but that's all they are. You have to manage to it and continue to tweak it. And this is something that you can use going forward forever in your company, but it will continually have to be tweaked all the time. And a lot of CEOs and a lot of C-suites don't do that. They get caught up in, well, we got to keep doing loans. And instead of managing to their strategic plan, just really get caught up in the production side of it to make the money. And that's where they get slammed in a market like this.
Yeah, one of the questions, Howard, you alluded to it earlier in an earlier comment that just came in through one of my text messages to me. First of all, they're saying this is a much needed service. It's grateful that you guys are offering it. Hope you're wildly successful with it. It is badly needed. It's one of the things evidently being talked about. But how do you prepare, Howard, to your point, for how long this is going to be? Each person here, we have hopes. We all hope this is going to be a short-term thing, that this is going to actually, we're going to see 2023 be positive. We're not here to project one way or another, and I know you guys don't do that, but how do you plan for something like this? I mean, how long will this season be, and does that adjust? Does a CEO or a C-suite team approach right-sizing in a different manner based on the perceived time it'll be? Howard?
Well, I think that goes back to a little bit what David Kittle just said, which is there has to be a plan around it. It's one thing, okay, where your volumes are today, and and you build a model and say volume's going to go up, 10% every month, if all it is numbers on a piece of paper, that's not a plan. You have to ask yourself, what am I going to do to make volume go up 10% every month? Or maybe I just have to accept, like, I don't think we can, so I have to accept that it's going to be flat for the next couple of months, and then we're going to go into a tough season in the winter. So what do I want to do there? So it's really, there isn't a one size fits all. It's about, where you are financially. Look, some companies can afford, let's just be honest, some companies can afford to run a loss for some period of time and may choose to
Balance
do
sheet,
that
yes, exactly
from
right.
long term. Others, are tighter from a capital and liquidity standpoint. They got to stop the bleeding and get to a minimum break even. So it's a different type of strategy. So part of what we would do is really dig out and, pull out those answers to those questions to help make the best decisions.
David, you want to add to that?
No, I don't know how you can add to perfection. That was a good response.
Yeah. Well, I do have another question on this because it comes in the line. This is one that wasn't texted in, but it comes to point you just hit another point, brilliant point you hit on, Howard. Talk about planning. I also like to say hope is not a strategic or a real plan. Hope is not a plan. It's something we can all hope for. But here's the thing. When the pandemic hit, one of the things that's surprised me. I should have known this because I started my career 48 years ago in a bank in the mortgage department, and they have plans for everything. When the pandemic hit, they had a plan. They pulled their pandemic planning manual out. Here's what we thought about if a pandemic plan. Independent mortgage bankers don't necessarily have the foresight to plan like that. And I really think this is such a rich and rare opportunity for us to begin to have forward thinking. What about this? Scenario planning. David, thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, welcome to the Lick and Kittle cliche club, but if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So yeah, you got to have all those scenarios around it, and those things take time and they take focus. And when you're doing a lot of loans and you've been in this huge refinance boom we've been in for years and years, nobody looks at that. Nobody was really prepared for this. If you ask everybody last year at this time that we were going to be in this market next year, 99% of the people would have said, no, got to end sometime, but not ending now. And
so how do we plan for something like this, Howard? How do we have a pandemic plan, a right size plan, market conditions? What is the right approach to this?
Well, I've worked in a bank environment and had to do some of those plans that you thought would never be used. So, you have to balance resources, but in terms of, everyone should have in the back of their mind a plan for when volume goes down, because it's going to happen. I mean, that's just the nature. You might not know exactly when, but it's going to happen. And the alternative is you should also have a plan for when volumes start to go up. There's nothing wrong with having a list of people that you want to hire or call should volume suddenly start going up. I mean, it's a fortunate, unfortunate situation right now in that there's a lot of great people in the market. And I don't want you to lead them on in terms of suggesting there's a job, but there's nothing wrong with having your HR department, if you have one, or whoever you have, having people at the ready and having some conversations like, hey, we're not hiring right now, but it's going to happen. And we'd love to talk with you a little bit now, for when those opportunities present themselves.
Boy, you hit on a really, really good point. It's developing the relationships, even with some of the employees you let go. If you do it in the right way, the employees will want to come back if you treated them well on the exit. Everyone, I think, basically understands we have a business to run here. But this is a great stuff. I just had another question. I am a TMC member. How would I get started? I'm assuming, David, well, we know a fact. Just tell everybody, they contact you.
You're right.
Right?
Yeah. So there's a link on the TMS website that they can get in touch with us. So just go to Transformation Mortgage Solutions, then click the link on there for organizational health. Love to talk to you.
Very, very good. And then when you get started, what's anticipated? You come in, you do an initial evaluation. Talk a little bit about that and the steps that go on, and then we'll see if Sarah has any questions.
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the size of the company and what they're actually looking for. Are they have they not downsized yet, or have they already done it? They think they've done it incorrectly and they need some help, or they want to talk about planning and going forward. But it would certainly an initial phone call. And, as Stephen Howard and I have been talking, they may only need 2 of us. They may not need all 3 of us. We might find that
Okay.
out. So it's an issue. Then we would come in for a couple of days and sit and talk and interview and get the things that Howard needs to look over, all the financials. And then we'll make an evaluation. And within about 10 days after we're done, we'll give you a report and tell you what we believe objectively you need to do to go forward to succeed.
Very good. Sarah, you popped on here. Do you have any questions coming in from anyone?
I do not so far, but if anyone does have any questions, you can always get in touch with any of us for those to get answered for you.
And being TMC members, which TMS is glad to be a member of TMC, do we do anything special for our TMC members, Mr. Kittle? I suspect we do.
Absolutely. We're going to give them great service, but there is a discounted service for TMC members as opposed to when we take this and go outside of the Mortgage Collaborative. So, yeah.
That's it. So great. I think that covers a lot of most of the bases that we had for you, Sarah. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, guys. For everyone on the call, if you do have any questions, please let anyone on this call know. We will be sending a follow-up email, so you can always respond to that. The follow-up email will include links to watch this on YouTube as well as view on our podcast as well.
Great. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a good day, everyone.
You as
Bye.
well. Bye.